Welcome to the Redeemed Backslider with your host, Kathy Chastain, Christian-based psychotherapist and redeemed backslider. This podcast is dedicated to those who have wandered but are ready to return to the life-changing power of grace and the freedom found in Jesus.
Hello, and welcome to the Redeemed Backslider. I'm your host, Kathy Chastain. I'm a Christian-based psychotherapist and a redeemed backslider. With me in the studio today is Maria Vasquez. She's going to share a little bit about how she came to the Lord, how she backslid, and where she is today. So, Maria, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you reached out and wanted to share your testimony.
Yes.
I know a little bit about your history, but I have not heard it in detail. So tell me what was going on in your life before you walked into the doors of a church.
It was a Friday night, and me and my husband, and we had a couple of friends over our house. The kids were asleep, and I remember that we were doing cocaine all night, and we stayed up all night, and it was the morning time, and the people left, and my husband said, "I'm going to bed." And then I said, okay. So I went to try to go to bed, and I was frustrated because I couldn't go to sleep. And I'm like, like I was mad at him because he was like falling asleep. So I don't know. I just had this thought. I wasn't thinking straight. I went to the medicine cabinet and I opened it up and I just looked in there and I thought, well, I should just take some NyQuil. But I had been doing cocaine all night long. I just took a drink of the NyQuil, just one drink. And within seconds, less than a minute, all of a sudden, I felt a flush all over my face. I was having trouble breathing, and I could see in the mirror that my veins were like engorged, like big. And I was like freaking out, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I woke my husband up. I'm like, I feel like I'm having an anxiety. I can't breathe. Like, you need to take me to the hospital. He's like, no, we're going to go. He was just saying all these things. We're going to go to jail. We're going to go to prison. We're going to, all this stuff. And I said, you have to take me. You have to take me. So he got up and he was just so stressed out. We had to wake the kids up. We had to go to my mother-in-law's and he had to get off the car and drop them off. He didn't tell them what or anything. So we get to the hospital and I am just freaking out. I can't breathe. So I go into the back room. They admit me in. And of course, they ask you, what's wrong with you? And I had to tell the truth. You know, I had been doing cocaine all night and they just stared at me like with nothing. Like, I don't know. It was just weird. It was like everything was still, like the room was still. The nurse was just staring at me, like just looking at me, like not talking, like what they were going to do to help me. So I remember that I was sitting there and I was freaking out and my husband was across from me and I was like, I could literally feel my body and my spirit like separating. Somehow I knew and I could see, I don't know how I could see, but like I was on this slide and I was going down and I knew that I was going to hell. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was crying and I was trying to stay focused, looking at my husband, like, look at me, like, because I'm separating, right? And I knew I was, raised Catholic. I didn't know Christ. I knew a little bit about religion, not really a relationship. So I remember that I could hear two voices. It was like one over here and one over here. And one's like, just ask me for help. And then the other one was like, you've been so bad. You better not even don't even ask. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to take a chance. And I said, God, if you help me right now, I will never do this again. And instantly, I literally was just normal. Like I could breathe again. And I looked at my husband and I said, I'm fine. And he was like thinking I was going crazy because he's like, you were just, he's like, what? I go, no, literally, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, I'm okay. The nurse came back in. It was just so weird the way everybody was. I don't even know if the doctor came in. But anyway, I think from what I remember, they gave me a shot, I think of Valium or something. I don't know, something to bring me down or something like that. I don't even know. We walked out of the hospital that day and I went home and my husband was just like, we have to stop everything. We were actually big time drug dealers. I don't even want to say, but we were actually, doing that. And my husband said, we have to stop everything. That is it. And so people would keep knocking on the door. He'd say, nope, we're not doing that anymore. And so from there, it was so hard because I was doing cocaine every day for like a year. Mm-hmm. So I was very addicted. Mm-hmm. And I was like, my whole body was just like going crazy. Like
from withdrawal, the dependency.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Like I couldn't do anything. I was just shaking. I was just couldn't breathe. It was almost like it was happening over again. I couldn't breathe. So then I would just be like, what am I going to do? Like I was sick. I couldn't even do anything. I couldn't even barely watch my kids. My mom had to come over. She'd help me. She'd cook for me. I was like, I was just stuck in the room. I didn't know what to do. And then I had an idea and I thought, I'm sure it was the devil, but I thought, I told God that I wouldn't do the cocaine, but I didn't say I wouldn't do something else. Mm. So wow. I know I had a thought and I thought, well, Rudy, I told my husband, oh, maybe you could just go get some like marijuana or something else like to get me down, like to calm me down. And as soon as I took that smoke, I had the same reaction, almost as if I was going to the hospital again. I couldn't breathe. I remember freaking out. It was so crazy. I walked outside and I think in my pajamas, and I just literally laid in the grass and it was wet. And I was just laying there looking to the sky like, what am I going to do? Like, I need help. I didn't know what to do. And then, of course, that didn't work. And then, of course, I tried the alcohol. I tried a few things and nothing worked. Within days after that, we were at the house. I remember I was in the living room and I only had 2 kids at the time. Do you have Kleenex?
Oh, yes.
So then I remember we were at the house and I think I was in the bedroom and there was a knock at the door and my husband called me. He's like, Maria, your aunt's here. And I go, what? It was like at night. It was like 9 or 9:30 at night. And I go to the door and it was so weird. She just like peeked around the corner. She goes, hey, I just wanted to invite you to church. And I go, what? I was like looking at her like, what? You're here at 9:30? I know, wow. It was probably revival.
Yeah.
At church. So they were probably like, so I don't know what God put her on my mind or whatever, because we were raised Catholic and there's no way we were to go to any other church. So it was like she was being secretive. Like, right. Hey, I've been going to that little church over there, but I wanted to invite you. And I'm like, yes, I will be there tomorrow. Yes. I said, wow. Yes. I was like, so anyway, after that, I couldn't wait. I got dressed. I went to the church and I sat in the back and it was literally like, I had never really heard, like we were Catholic, so it's so different. Mm-hmm. All the music, everything. And it was as if when he was preaching, it was like straight piercing to me, like boom.
That's
boom,
how God
boom.
does it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was just like, and as soon as he gave the altar call, I was like practically running up there. Like I had to get up there. I needed to get up there. So as soon as I got up there, he's like, do you want to accept Jesus Christ? And I said, yes. And then he goes, you want the Holy Ghost? And I go, yes. And then they prayed for me right there. I was instantly filled, speaking in tongues immediately that night.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God. It was like, I didn't know anything, what was going on or anything, but I just knew that that's what I needed, but it wasn't easy from there.
Yeah. So I have to ask about your kids, right? 'Cause,
I knew you.
yeah, sorry, I can't help it. I'm
I was
a therapist.
Say something,
My heart bleeds for
let
kids.
me tell you.
So how old were they when this happened? And you guys were drug dealers.
Yeah.
How are the kids?
So my 2 kids, I had a boy and a girl, and they were like young and the thing is that I know I was going to say something about my kids too, because they're probably thinking, oh my God, a mother like that. But my 2 kids were the first grandkids on both sides of the family. So almost all the time, they were not with us.
Okay.
They stayed at that. They stayed with his mom. It would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Oh, you want the kids? Yes. Then the next weekend was my mom. So it was like back and forth. We never really had them around any of.
And I'm absolutely not judging.
No,
100%.
Yeah.
Because, it's just part of, I think, life. And people don't realize we think, that the kids are asleep, that they don't really know what's going on, that they're too young to kind of understand. But, obviously we know now that kids take it all in, even from infancy. So
yes,
I was just asking not to be offensive or anything.
No, that's fine because they were spoiled on both sides. So they were mostly with the grandparents on both sides, and they were, never really around. They were probably, gosh, I got to think, I was probably 36. I have to do the math. Like they were in school because they were going to school because I had a lot of free time in the day. How was I able to go get the drugs, package it all up? That's while they were at school.
Right.
So 5 and 6, 5 and 7, somewhere in that kindergarten, because they're like 2 years apart.
So Maria, that's really crazy that you could feel yourself sliding into hell, and there was an understanding and awareness that you weren't ready to meet God, that you were absolutely going to go to hell. And I also love that you were able to distinguish the voices.
Yes.
Because a lot of people hear voices. I mean, because the devil's always speaking. I believe the Lord is always speaking. We just can hear one a little bit louder than the other sometimes, but I think it's great that you were able to recognize the difference between the two. And so you said yes to God in that moment, and you asked him for help, and you said, I'll never do that again. And the next day you said, so you thought you would do marijuana. Were you just feeling like you needed something, like you didn't know what to do with your time? Or you didn't know how to live? Like, what was going on with you that you felt like you needed some form of substance instead of like turning to God more in that moment before you ever went to church?
Well, my body was detoxing.
Yes. Okay.
So
gotcha.
I didn't know anything about God. So my body was, and then I was talking
that makes sense.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my friends, and I didn't even know she's a nurse. She was like, Maria, because she's writing my book actually, and she said, Maria, did you know that you literally could have died because you can't just stop your body like
cold turkey
for doing it for a whole year. My body was so bad that I couldn't even take care of us. I couldn't even think. My mother didn't know anything that was going on. She would take me to the doctor. I'd say, Mom, I'm so sick, and I'm like, can you take me to the doctor? And we went to the doctor so many times, and the doctor kept looking at me and kept looking at me. And she finally gave me some antidepressants. She goes, you're depressed. And I'm like, so I took the pill, but it was so weird because when I took the pills, I felt like I was in this bubble. It was just so weird. And it was just like, I thought I was going to go crazy with the pills.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember also, because I was barely learning about God, just anything I didn't know, because I barely started accepting Christ. I didn't know anything. I remember TBN was on. Remember Jan and Paul Crouch?
Yes, right.
They were on. And so I was sitting in the bed. I was pretty much a lot of bedridden. I couldn't even cook. I couldn't even think. I was nervous, just anxiety. And I remember I was about to take the pill. I took one and it made me feel horrible. So I was about to take the second one. And then Jan Crouch was on the TV and she goes, don't take that pill. And I go, she's talking to me? I was like,
Wow.
and I go, what? And then I go, so I didn't take the pill. So I put it down and I thought, okay. She's like, just put your hand and I'm going to pray for you on the dill. So I did that. But soon after that, remember I told God that I wouldn't do it anymore?
Right.
My best friend became like a witch, like evil. Like the next thing after I had prayed, I was doing okay. It was a knock at the door. It was my friend.
And at this time, you're going to a Pentecostal church.
barely started, and I'm trying to know about God.
Okay.
They hadn't even picked me up yet to disciple me yet.
Okay.
So I'm by myself.
Right.
So I'm listening to TBN. I'm kind of trying to put church channel. I had several different church channels on. So she knocks at the door. I'm by myself. My husband's at work. I'm still very weak. I lost a lot of weight. I was couldn't eat.
Mm-hmm.
She knocks at the door. I open the door and she's like, it was like not even her. She looked at me straight faced and I go, oh my God, I was, in the hospital, almost died. She goes, she didn't even look at me. She just walked right to the room. She goes, come with me. And I was like, she got the cocaine and laid it right there on my dresser. And she's like, you better do this. And I go, I was all of a sudden like, oh my God, I remember I told God that I wouldn't do it. And I didn't know what to do. And then she ended up going to the bathroom. And I thought, what am I going to do? I remember just shoving it into the drawer and then shutting it. And then she came out and she goes, did you do it? And I said, yes. And she goes, she didn't even say bye. She just took off and walked up. I believe that was literally another assignment from the enemy.
Did you know that she was a witch, or do you think that she was a witch?
I think she was possessed, not a witch, but meaning it wasn't her.
Right. There was, that she was sent there to make you compromise.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet she was my best friend. She didn't care. It was like she was like
someplace else. Yeah.
Not the same person.
Yeah.
It was weird. It was like, And so then after that, my husband's like, I told him what happened. I was so weak. I couldn't. Honestly, I don't want to say this. I'm not going to say it. But anyway, my husband told her, don't you ever come back to this house again.
Wow.
So she never did.
So how did your husband respond to this new change in you to going to church and wanting to try to pursue the Lord?
He was all for it because
that's very rare.
I know. Because
two people at the same time.
He was all for me going, not
Oh,
him. Okay. Not him. It was for me going because we were raised Catholic. Remember, they're very strict Catholics, his family and my family. So he's like, yeah, you know, whatever's going to help you. Because I remember, and to be honest, the day before, a week before the drug overdose, the cops and everybody were kind of getting, in our small town, getting like hot, like meaning they were busting people, arresting people. So my husband had already said, we have to stop. And when he told me that, I said, I'm not stopping. He said, what? And he goes, I said, I'm not stopping. And I go, I don't care if you leave me. You could just leave. I'm not stopping. And it was a day or two, the next day or two, when I almost died of that drug overdose. Wow. So don't disobey your husband. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I mean, if he's telling you to do the right thing, right? Yeah. So I literally disrespected him and told him, I don't care if you leave me. Fine, leave. I'm staying with this.
Yeah. So you go to church. The Lord fills you with the Holy Ghost. Yeah. You are learning how to live different, right? Yes. And tell me about what happens then.
Okay, so I start going to church. My aunt's there. So I finally get picked up by maybe somebody to disciple me. Okay. So it's a couple in the church. They're an older couple. They said, okay, is it okay if, we start having Bible study? And I said, yeah. So I was there. They lived literally around the corner from me. So I started attending Bible study quite frequently. I started learning little things, but the very first thing, of course, it was, that church where you can't wear makeup and you can't wear pants, and all that. So
right. They were a UPC church.
Yes. Yeah. So they immediately started saying, oh, well, the first few scriptures are, man's apparel and just all of this stuff.
So they literally came at you with that first?
Yeah, it was kind of like the first thing, the do's and don'ts and kind of that. And I was just like so hungry and desperate. Like I just, just went along with it and everything. And they were praying for me, I still wasn't that good as in the anxiety because my body was still detoxing.
Sure.
So other than that, I kept going. And then it was, my husband would go once in a while, but he wouldn't really like it because, when he went in, if he, they came to our house and maybe did a Bible study, but then they went into immediately like, well, about shaving your mustache and, the long shirts. And my husband's like, there's no way in summer I'm wearing those long shirts, long sleeve shirts. Yeah. And then I go, I was just like, so, and then, of course, his whole family, would party and have parties and drink and do all that. And he wasn't about to give that. He was happy for me, of course. And I took all the kids and he didn't mind me taking the kids, But right after that, I started getting pregnant. Like I had 3 kids in within 4 years.
Oh, wow. So you have a total of 5 children?
6 children.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
So I got saved. And then I literally think I probably got pregnant that week or something. I don't know. I was like, and then after that one, and then another one. So I was taking all the kids, all 5 of them, because my other son came later on. But
Maria, was it hard for you to go to church without your husband? Was it? It sounds like you guys had a good relationship to where you were fine going to church. He supported you going to church. You were okay with him hanging out with his family, drinking and partying a little?
Not really, but what are you going to do? You're going to pray. But I didn't mind going by myself. Okay. I don't care if I had to take all 5 kids. I would take all 5 kids and go by myself. And I was fine because I was so hungry and desperate and just wanting to know and just you just want that peace, that freedom,
Right.
All of that was just there, and that you can't buy that anywhere, right? You can't take a drug and get that anywhere.
Right.
It was just, so I was going for like 7 years.
So you were getting what you needed from God there. Aside from all the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
When you went to church, you felt like that's where you belonged and you felt, the Lord and all the wonderful things that being Pentecostal brings in that kind of an atmosphere, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So you go about 7 years, your kids are growing.
And then they start getting older. They start rebelling because of all the rules.
Okay.
Because we couldn't play cards. We couldn't go to the show. We couldn't, watch movies. We couldn't have a TV. I mean, we kept the TV, but,
but it was discouraged.
Whenever it was me, they weren't watching TV. So it was all these rules. And then my kids, I hate it now thinking about like all the rules I put on them. Like, don't do this, don't do this. Like, for me, it was okay because I was willing to do whatever. But when all these rules, and then they started to go to junior high, and, my daughter was so upset because, she's like, there's no way I'm wearing culottes. I'm not doing it. Like, so she would sneakily take shorts and then chain them and then go to PE. And so it was just a lot for the 2 older ones. The little ones.
It's hard on kids in public. Yeah, very much.
But God started revealing to me little by little things that you start seeing things. Okay, I'm in 7 years. All of a sudden they're like, okay, so you're not going to wear your wedding band. And then you see, I'm not going to say the pastor's daughter, but you see others wearing, a watch with some diamonds, or you're wearing a beret with diamonds. I go,
it doesn't make sense.
So what's the difference?
Yeah, right.
That just, and so like how God pulls the veil back, I guess,
right,
a little bit for you to see some truth. And I'm not going to hell because I'm wearing pants. I'm not, it's these things that you kind of get ingrained, and it almost, I was thinking about it the other day, like it was like we were a beautiful family, but it was almost like we we were prideful. Like, if we wore our dresses and we saw them wearing pants, we're like, we're so good,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought about, did you ever feel, I don't know, it seems to be some kind of sort of pride, like, oh, we have the whole truth and we're saved and we're just,
yes, I agree.
It seems like that, and then when, I think it started getting bad when they would bust the kids in, and these are kids. Oh, you're going to tell them on your first one, oh yeah, you should get a dress, I'm like, they're kids.
And how long ago was this, Maria? How many years?
Oh, I was there at, oh my gosh, I was young. I had my first 5 kids there. So my son was born in 1987, 89, and 90.
Okay, so
I left 7 years later, and I've been at another church now.
Okay, so it's been at least a good 20, 25 years ago since you were there.
Yeah.
And so I know that I think to the audience, there's been, in searching out backsliders and wanting to get people's story, the issue of standards comes up a lot. And so I do think it's important to have the conversation, especially for people who, like you, Maria, who fell in love with church and what I think the Pentecostal church brings, the Spirit of God, the move of God. I think I don't think a lot of people have altar calls the way we do. In today's church culture, some may, I'm not sure, but I haven't seen it too awful much. But that was definitely the tendency back then. That was often the first thing that did get spoken about in a lot of churches. And today I look back at that and think a couple of things. Number one, people were doing probably the best that they could with what they knew. And I also think that there was a lot of, this is so hard. There's a very fine line between, there's just a very fine line between legalism and religious abuse versus true, authentic relationship and pursuing God and trying to be as holy because of the way someone interprets the Bible, And so I think what's changed and what is changing today, which I have seen, and I don't know that pastors across the board are like this, but I am very encouraged that many that I have come in contact with are, that is less of a conversation. They're much more apt to allow God to clean the inside.
Yes.
And they believe, as I believe, that He works on the outside.
Yes.
I've said several times that the things He changed in me originally had nothing to do with the outside. Over time it has, but that's just because God's given me understanding in some things and a different desire for some things, but and some healing, obviously. So I think a lot of that is healing. And I think you're correct. There is a lot of judgment and there is a lot of pride around the outward appearance. But again, I want to just say that when we judge that from the other side, when we're the ones being judged because of how we look, and then we turn around and judge them, it's still the same judgment, and we typically, backsliders, act out of our own hurt, especially for female backsliders where they do and did get tripped up on the standards of things and why often they won't come back to a Pentecostal church because they say, I'm never going to dress like that. I don't want that to be part of the reason someone doesn't come back, and to have the conversation with a pastor where you want to go and be able to ask them the questions, Because I believe, and I think you believe, that if God is doing the work, everything else, if our pursuit is really about Him and to draw closer to Him and to be holy like He is holy, God knows how to teach us, and He does teach us,
Yes.
I think there are considerations. I know that for me, when I first started going back to a United Pentecostal church, I wanted to be considerate of those that I was attending church with, so I dressed appropriately to be considerate of them, just in a way to honor them, So in that sense, I think there should be some sort of containment around what we do wear to church, because if I went, in a tube top, would definitely not be appropriate, right?
Yeah.
But with that said, I think people just have to come to God wherever they're at, however they are.
Yes,
right?
I agree. Yes.
And I feel for your kids going to school, because it was very hard for me being in public school, having to say, I couldn't dress out in PE or couldn't play sports because of, this or that. So at that time, life began to change for you, right? When your kids begin to ask questions about how they had to dress.
Yes. And then also, it was getting to the point where, of course, I became a soul winner. So I started telling everybody about Christ, all my drug friends, everybody. So everybody started coming and started getting saved. But then I don't know what happened. I asked my dad, and my dad comes and my dad gets saved. My mother was so mad because she was Catholic. My grandma and my mom were so mad at me. They never knew that I was sick because of the drugs. They just thought I was sick. But I was sick and then I got better. So they're like still mad because I'm at that church. It's like a betrayal.
And not a Catholic church.
Betrayal. Yeah. So my dad goes, my mother is so mad. My dad gets saved. He gets baptized. But right after that, my dad is so, he's smart and he studies the Bible. So he started studying and he started telling me, no. So then he had 2 of the pastors come over to his house, and we all sat there and went over the scriptures over and over and, every way. And to me, at that point, I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay there or was I going to leave? And I was already a key holder to the church. I was on the prayer team. I was
involved.
Yes, women's ministry, everything. And it was very difficult because I loved all of them and they were like my family and they were there for me, but I couldn't stay. And I remember talking to the pastor and we were looking at each other and I was handing him the key back. And I said, this is all I said is like, I know you know, and I know, but you're not willing to leave, but I have to leave. I'm going to leave. And at that point, I was like left and I thought, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go to church? And I remember driving around Visalia, and all of a sudden, God's like, right there. And I go, right there? I can't go there. That's the one they told me not to go to. It's a Trinity church. And I go, and I just obeyed God and I walked in with my skirt, no makeup, and they welcomed me in. I went to Bible study and I've been there ever since. So I've been there 25 years.
And you said somewhere along the way after you left, you relapsed. After you left the
Yes. So I ended
church.
So I ended up having more kids and I ended up raising them there at that church. That's what I kind of messed up there. I'm trying to think. I had some at the UPC church and then
you went to a Trinity church.
Then I went to a Trinity church. So I took them and I raised the 3 little ones in the Trinity church, which, it's not that strict.
Right.
So that's why when my kids now they're bigger, they're like, oh, you guys got lucky. These three got lucky because you didn't have all the rules and regulations. So honest to God, those younger kids that I raised stayed with Christ. The two older ones left Christ and hated church, religion, God, whatever. They were gone. They were not coming back. They came back years later, But other than that, okay, so we were...
But somewhere along the line, you backslid.
Yes. So I'm attending this other church, and then all of a sudden, I'm back up in the ministry, and then all my kids are now in school. I'm home by myself, and my husband's working, and I just get this idea, like, what am I going to do with my time? I'm thinking, you know what? I should go back to school, and I want to go back to school and be a teacher. And this was my thought, like, I want to go back to school and be a teacher, because what if something happens to my husband and I'll have something back, to fall back on, I'll have an education or something. So I'm going to school, COS, full time. Every morning I would stop at this gas station and get my cup of coffee. And the manager would always say, oh my gosh, like, you have the most beautiful smile. Anytime you want to work here, like, you're going to school part-time, you want to work here part-time for me, you can, like, I'll hire you. So I was like, I thought about it and I go, I guess I could work part-time, and go to school. But this is the tricky part. All the while, I'm letting up on my Bible reading, letting up on my church attendance, letting up on my prayer life. All the while, you're like, oh, I got to go to school. I have to study. Oh, I got this small part-time job. And you look at yourself like, I'm still fine. And we're going to church on Sunday and we're fine. And all of a sudden, coworker, we're all together. And I remember this one coworker, I met everybody there and we were all like friends and whatever. So one of them was there and he just looked at me and he goes, you're going to be mine. And I said, what? And I was like, you're off. Or, I'm married and, I'm my husband and, whatever, are my kids. And then all the other workers were like, stay away from her. Like, we love her and this, that. So all of a sudden, I'm working part-time, all letting up on all of that. All of a sudden, I had no attraction for him whatsoever. I would always preach, teach, while I'm at work. Then all of a sudden, one day it was getting dark and I remember him walking me out to the car at night, right? It was late. All of a sudden, I remember that he like bumps me, just like from the side, like the arm or something. And I felt something like my body, something happened. I didn't know what. So I went home. I was fine. The next day that I go back to work, I had like this weird attraction to him. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, I literally now believe that it probably was the spirit of lust that came off of him onto me. All the while I was becoming weaker, right? Having an open door, which is dangerous, not knowing. And soon after that, I ended up having an affair with this guy, which I thought in a million years, Kathy, I would have never done, because my father did that to my mother. My grandfather did it to my grandma. And I swore I'll never do this to my family. And I hated my dad for 7 years and I couldn't forgive him. And here I was, that same person. How does that happen?
It's generational. I believe it's generational.
Yeah, it had to be, because my grandpa, my dad, me, and just to come to find out recently, one of my children. That's 4 generations.
That's what the Bible says, up to the 4th generation. But you can break that.
Yes.
Your child, whoever,
Absolutely.
whichever needs to pray and break that.
Yes. It's not going to go any further. So
So how long did that affair last?
I'd say 6 months, maybe less than 6 months.
And are you going to church all the while?
Oh,
No?
it was tough. All of a sudden, it's like you still have this reverence for God and you still have this love for God. And it's like, how could I even step into the church to even you know what? I'm like, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? People say, oh, just stop. You don't understand. It's not like that, because the Bible says you become one with that person.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a soul tie.
And it's not like you can you can't.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be prayed and delivered. My husband started praying. He started praying. He went to the church and he forgave me in the beginning. And he all the pastors, everybody started, praying for me.
Did you get found out, or did
yes.
you?
Oh,
you got
yes.
caught. Okay.
So I was at work one day, and then my daughter, was raised in church, so she knew the scriptures a little, and she saw something about my character was off.
Mm-hmm.
My husband had no clue, and she said, something's not right with my mother. And all of a sudden she said, I'm just going to do this prayer. I'm going to pray whatever is in secret will come out in the open. And in 3 days, I was caught. My husband called the work and they said, she's not here. Mm. And when I got home, we had to talk about it. And it was very difficult from there. And that's when he told the pastors, and, she's doing this, and they started praying for me. It wasn't easy because I was still back and forth, and forgave me, and then we're trying, and back and forth, and it wasn't easy. And then one day I just thought, what am I going to do? But I literally was off. How do you say off mentally? Meaning, when you're in that, I couldn't even, it's like I crossed that line into the enemy's territory. And I was in this la, I don't know, I wasn't even thinking straight, because I'm I'm literally thinking, am I really going to leave my husband and I'm going to go with this guy that I barely met? And I'm going to leave my kids? And I'm just and then I couldn't even listen to rationality. People would tell me, what are you doing? And I'm I just wouldn't have an answer. And I'm and then I went with the guy to look at, I was going to leave him. And we went to go look at this place to live. And when I walked in there, I thought, how am I going to live in this small little bit? I had a huge, beautiful house, Kathy. My husband bought me the most beautiful house. I had 5 children at the time. What was I thinking?
Yeah. Just caught up. Just totally caught up in it.
Yeah. And so everybody started praying. Everybody started praying. The church started praying. All of a sudden, it was like the scales were being removed little by little, little by little. I was starting to be able to see, how could I told myself, how could I really think this is really going to work out? It's absolutely not. I'm talking to myself,
Was your husband going to church with you at that time, or he just just went and told the pastors?
He was. We were both attending the new church. All of my family was attending. All of us were. And so that's what was crushing to him, is that you're in church and yet this is happening.
Right.
So he was devastated. They started praying, and then all of a sudden, I remember this, whether it was in a dream or a vision. I remember that I saw myself in the corner of a room. It was dark, and I was naked, and I was covering myself, and I was looking down, and I literally remember the devil pacing back and forth around me, and he's like, now I have you. What am I going to do with you? And he was just thinking like this. And then all of a sudden, I see Jesus come. I saw a bright light from the corner. And he walks into the room, and all he had to do was just like move his pinky like this. And the devil was slammed against the wall, and I was able to come out. And that's soon after that, when I came out, I thought, what am I going to do? I need help. And I just walked into the doors of the church. I hadn't stepped into the church for months. I walked into the doors of the church, and I thought, whatever. If they condemn me, whatever. If they talk about me, whatever. They're my family. So I walked in, and I went into the office, and I said, can I talk to Carol or the pastor, one of the pastors? And then I talked to one of the pastors, and he's like, no, we're going to help you. We're going to help you. We're going to help you. And then I remember this to this day. The secretary came out with me, walked me all the way to the car, and she goes, Maria, I love you so much. She said, this just happened to my daughter. My daughter had an affair, and we just had to deal with this with my daughter. And I love you like my daughter, and I'm going to be there for you. So her and her husband were there with me through it, and they're still my spiritual parents to this day. They took me under their wings. I went to counseling for 6 months with the church, and I was restored back to Christ and back again. And it was hard from there. Of course, my husband, left, and then he didn't trust me, of course, all of that. He didn't want to be with me at the end, and he left, and they said, just let him, go, and we'll just keep praying. And sure enough, God is so good. He brought him back 9 months later, and the whole family was restored, and it was a miracle from God. So but it wasn't easy by any sense at all.
And so you and your husband are still together?
Yes, we were, but my husband just passed away 2.5 years ago.
Oh, Maria. I'm so sorry to hear that.
We were together 45 years. I met my husband at 15 and a half years old.
Wow.
16, we got together. I had my first child at 17, and we were together ever since.
Well, thank goodness that the Lord restored that before.
Yes, way passed. Years before. Yeah. Years before.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your loss. I did lose that.
Yeah.
So, can you tell a difference between the two churches and the way the Holy Ghost moves? Have you ever contemplated the difference? For me, I went to the same church for a while that you're going to now, just because I never wanted to go back to a United Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
And I could feel the presence of God there, and I appreciated the church, for what it was for me at that stage of my life. But I've never ever found the depth and the move of the Holy Ghost, and I've just never found that anyplace else besides a United Pentecostal church. And I don't know that it exists in every United Pentecostal church, or just say that.
Yeah.
Some churches are dead.
Yeah.
But I've never felt the depth. I've never felt that vein of, the river, the Holy Ghost move, like it does in a Pentecost, in a United Pentecostal church.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of that? Do you notice that difference?
I noticed that, and I don't want to be critical, but
no one knows what churches we're talking about.
I do see the depth of that, but I also do see, how do you say, facade? I do see over exaggeration with some people.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Where they overdo it, and
so you don't trust that it's always authentic.
Yes, because the screaming, shouting, running, just all of that is sometimes overdone.
But did you ever do that when you were there?
But not extreme, extreme.
Yeah.
But I would say It is powerful, but where I'm at, it's the same power, but not as if, it's more constricted or, because of time, because of the time crunch. But like if we have our worship night, then it's free to do whatever, it's freedom. But with the time constraints, I have noticed the difference. Like it seems that the other church, they don't care about the time.
No, we don't. Because we care about a move of God.
Yeah.
It's all
the
about
time. The time. Yes. Can move and keep moving. That's like revival, right? Yes. So, that I could distinguish between those two. Other than that, just more freedom over here, as in the pressure over here of how you're going to dress and how you're going to act, where you're going. Oh my God, if they saw I was going here, or oh my God, just I can't keep thinking about what they're going to think about. I'm not going to be a people pleaser, right? And then me leaving the church, then a lot of them said they were my family, said they loved me, and yet when I walked away to go to this other church, they're like, oh well. Like they shun me. They don't even want to talk to me. I want to say hi to me. What is that about?
Yeah.
And then it was my own family. Oh, well, we remember when, you used to come to church and you had this glow about you. I'm like, really? So I don't have it now or what? Because I'm going over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, just like those little things. And then, but to be honest, now I'm saying with you, I think they're getting away from that rules and regulation because they're losing people and it's not healthy. And they're so nice now. This is years later.
Yeah.
When I see them, they're like, oh, hi, doesn't matter what I'm wearing or anything. Hi, how are you? They have let some of their guard down, some of their rules down. I bet they all have a TV now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, but
my pastor and I were talking about that in one of our videos because TV was the big thing then.
Oh, it was the devil. You better not have one. But my husband was never going to let it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And now,
now they're streaming online.
Yes. And looking back, what we talked about when my pastor was here is that, as kids, we don't know all the reasons why. We're just told, you can't do this, you can't do this. We didn't have any sort of understanding. But now seeing what's on television, there really isn't anything good. Very, very little. I tell my friends, but this is the Lord. I tell my friends, I watch about rated G. About rated G is what I could do. Maybe PG-13, but even then, sometimes I don't like it.
Yeah.
But God did that in me. I used to read. I used to be such an avid reader of novels, and I really loved mysteries, and I would read all this stuff. And I remember one night I was laying in bed reading, and the visuals that I was getting because of how explicit the gore and the violence was in the book, like God totally convicted me of that. And I just stopped reading all those books, and I loved to read. That's what I did at night. But my point is that, God knows how to convict us.
Yes.
And God does convict us when our heart is pure towards Him.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to just address a couple things, and I'm definitely not trying to convince you, but I maybe just share some of the lessons that I've learned in coming back. I used to work in the public much more than I'm in the public now. Now I'm kind of holed up in my office and I just don't see a lot of people, but I was in the public quite a bit. And anytime I saw a Pentecostal, that I could judge from the outside as being Pentecostal, I was very intently looking at them, very intently judging them, and the ones that knew me, I was also presuming that they were judging me as well.
Okay.
Even if I was dressed modestly, even if no matter what, because I was conditioned that way. I thought that they were treating me differently because I didn't go to church. And I thought that they were judging me because I didn't go to church there anymore. So my point is, we can assume a lot of things and consider them fact when in fact we really don't know what's fact.
Yeah.
Not to discredit what you said.
Yeah.
I am sure back then they probably didn't know what to say, you know, because there is a lot of that if you leave us, you're leaving the truth. And we are the only ones that have the truth.
Yes. And I tried to show them in the Bible, and they're like, then they stopped talking to me.
But what I want to address in that is that people are fallible,
Yes.
but Jesus is not.
Absolutely.
The Bible is the Bible is the Bible is the Bible. That is the true word of God, the only truth that exists.
Yes.
And we have to rightly divide the word of truth. It is meant as a whole. We cannot take scripture out of context. It all belongs together and it's jointly fitted together. But what happened to you and what has happened to many other people that I hear about has been very common in the UPC world. And so what I want to say to anyone watching, particularly to the backslider watching, who won't go back to a Pentecostal church because of the rules, because of the standards, because of what you think might be expected of you. And what I would say to you is give it a shot today. I think it's different today. I'm not saying that, you know, they've totally changed what they believe. There's plenty of people that wear dresses and, you know, don't wear makeup and all of that. And I think all of that, like when you meet and talk to someone a pastor that really loves their flock, they're not going to worry about that. They're going to let God come in and do the work in your heart. And they're going to give God all the space he needs to do whatever he wants to do in a person, you know? And I think that is what has changed. I think that in today's church world, at least in a church that is healthy and not being ran by a narcissistic, controlling pastor who can't get past all of that stuff, you know, God's got to do the work. There is so much pride in that, and there is so much control in that, and that's just not the Lord. We're supposed to love. We're supposed to let God do the work inside a person. God will do the work. So I would say that's the fallacy of people, and I don't believe it's a true representation of who God is and what God feels and what God thinks. And I actually don't even think it's probably the true representation of the pastor. I know there are pastors who are like that, but you got to find a pastor who can see you, who can love you, who can embrace you and just say, come. Come however you want to come. It would just come and worship, come and hear the word, come and get plugged in. You know, God's got to do all the rest of that, you know. I do think it has changed a lot in a lot of churches. There are a lot of churches that haven't allowed God to actually be in charge. So, and that's the conversation that I'm trying to have in this podcast is, you know, some people that I'm going to interview grew up in church and maybe never will come back to a United Pentecostal church. And I think that as a body, we have to look at that, you know? I think we have to look at that. I am back at a United Pentecostal church because there is an undeniable move of God, and I can't separate that. I can't just come and cherry pick what I want to do and what I'm not going to do. But I'm grateful for a pastor who's allowed God to lovingly teach me and grow me. And you know, God is moving me where he wants me to be. But ultimately, my desire is I want as much of God as I can get. I want to know him as much as I can know him. I want to be in his presence as much as I can be in his presence. And I just don't feel that at other places. And so I think there is something to the holiness that is there, and how that shows up for everybody, I think might be different. Again, because God is doing the work. But I would hate for anyone watching, and even you, Maria, I would hate for anyone to never come back to a United Pentecostal church because of a bad experience. I would say, come, see what you see, feel what you feel. Is the Lord there? Are people loving? Does it feel different than what it did back in the day? Because it feels it's different for me.
A long time.
And when I went back, and even sometimes after I do my podcast and I'm talking to God and second guessing things I've said and wondering, I pray no one is ever offended at what I've said, because that's not my desire. But I'm constantly talking to God and just praying that this is received in the spirit, that I mean it. And the thing that I hear from him over and over is, keep your eyes on me. I stay in my word, and I pray regularly. I have a strong prayer life, and I feel like as long as we're looking at God, as long as we're letting him be the author and the finisher, his spirit will lead us into all truth. And that's where I've just had to be. When I have questions, I go to my pastor, and I'm grateful today that, he can see me, and he knows, where I'm coming from. And there's things I don't understand that I'll talk to him about. But you got to walk out your walk with God,
Yes.
Anytime I hear people say they're going to think this or they're going to think that, that is the outside trying to encroach. And I do think it's a lot of, it triggers a lot of our wounds of rejection for sure. But it's also the enemy wanting to cause us to think about what others think instead of is God happy with you? Is he okay with how you look? Is he talking to you how you look? If the answer is yes, that's all that matters. Let walk in the spirit and let God lead you in the spirit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And I like what you said. If God wasn't there and the move of God wasn't there, I wouldn't be there. But like you said, I want to be in the presence of God. We're hungry. God is going to meet us there. And if there are more hungry people there, God's presence is even bigger. So I feel that. I sit in the front seat and my focus is on him, nobody behind me. It's me and him.
Yeah.
And he is there in such a full way that I'm full, but it's going to be us. We can't say, there's, no move of God or none of it. It's you.
Right.
You're
it's
hungry.
Individual walk.
You're pressing in. He said, seek me and you will find me. Knock and it will be open. It's you. Don't try to say it's not here. It's because of this. No excuses. It's us.
Yeah.
We want him and he's going to be there. And if he is there, it's going to be in a greater way. I feel a lot of his presence.
Yes. Yeah.
And I just, I want to stay there.
Yeah.
Because we want to grow. And I thank God, like you, when I have a question, immediately, because I had to learn from back then, I go to the pastors and I go, I want to know about this. And I want to know about this. And I want you to show me in the Greek and the Hebrew. And I want to know.
Yeah.
And and I already have studied several religions where they take out and put it out of context. So I know several. So, because there's so many things we're always going to be learning.
Yeah.
And
the Lord says, that he will lead us into all truth. So if you're, God's got to save us, right?
Yes.
It's not a church that's going to save us. It's not us
Spirit
that's
of
going to
God,
save
yeah.
us. God has to save us. He has to
Yes.
lead us. Our job is to yield to him, to be
Yes.
willing. You know, the more I read the Bible, the more I realize how much I don't know,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and I've been reading it for a long time, but there's just always so much more there to glean. So I'm glad, Maria. I would love to say, oh, come back,
I
you
know,
know,
I know.
just
Yes.
because it's so nice to worship with people that we know.
Oh,
But,
yes. Yes.
but I trust God, you know, and as long as you keep pursuing him, he knows how to,
Yeah.
he knows where you're at. He knows where I'm
Yeah.
at. He knows where all of us are at.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Absolutely.
I'm glad, like, he definitely saved your life. He definitely pulled you out of some
Two
stuff.
times or more than 2 times. There's more times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's more times. I mean, I could have died of the drug overdose. I could have died with the drug dealer killing me because I couldn't pay him back. And then, being lost, sinning and straying away from God, and then him bringing me back. God is so merciful and so loving. He will keep pursuing us
Yes.
and
he
never
does.
leave us or forsake us. And he loves us even while we were yet sinners. He died for us.
Yeah.
And he will never stop pursuing us until we're back with him.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I
Yeah.
love him. I love that.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. I think, as I said earlier, there's going to be stories on here. People will be at different places in their life, but I really want to hear the conversations of those who came into church and backslid and left, and where they're at in their walk with God today. So, thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
And for anyone watching, if you have a story, a testimony, if you've been a backslider, and you hated that label, if you still aren't going to church, and you've been labeled a backslider, I would love to talk to you. For anyone that is living for God, who does have a redemption testimony, I would love to talk to you too, because the Bible says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And, anytime we hear stories like this, she said she was a soul winner, it's because of what God did in her life, right?
Yes.
People can see the change. People can see there is something different when we begin to turn our life over to the Lord. So, reach out to me anytime. All the contact information is on the link. But I appreciate everybody who watches, and I hope that this is blessing you out there. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you again next week.
We are so glad you joined us. If you have a story of redemption or have worn the label of a backslider, we would love to hear from you. If you'd like to support our ministry, your donation will be tax deductible. Visit our website at kathychastain.com. We hope you will tune in for our next episode.